a man on fire.
Hello, welcome back to the Slackline Quote of the Day edition. This is our daily short segment where we go through something somebody might have said that piqued our interest and or my interest anyways, and we can have a little chat about it. It is January 4th, 2018, and there's a bunch of stuff going on. Everybody's back from holidays and whatnot, including all the craziness that's going on down south in the U.S. Closer and closer to thermonuclear war, which is interesting. I don't know if everybody feels this way, but to me, it's kind of interesting to be a part of history. We're kind of always a part of history, but every once in a while, major events happen that people will look back on and read about in textbooks or, and whatever the future of education is and stuff like that. I was alive for 9/11, and I'll never forget. I was walking past my TV on the way to school, and I just saw the towers burning on the TV, and I remember not really thinking about it, just being like, that's interesting. And then people were talking about it on the bus on the way to school, like, oh my God, did you hear about the Twin Towers? They got hit by those planes. And I was like, is that what that was? Like, oh my God. And, I was pretty young then, 12 years old. So I couldn't really process it until later, actually, probably until I actually went there. I saw Ground Zero. It was pretty nuts. A few years later, before they built the new building there. And then now this stuff with Donald Trump is happening, and it feels like we're kind of living through something like that again, something that is an exception, something that will change, how things go, because, 2018 is going to be an interesting year for that presidency and for that country, because to me, I look at it and all these people are implicated in what are, treasonous acts or, at best, very fatal ignorance. And so you go down the list of succession of who's to be president, and you're like, well, how many of these people are implicated or even fit to do this? Is there some sort of mechanism for re-election? And there's not, which it seems crazy to me, that there's not some sort of non-confidence vote that Congress can make or something like that in the president. I mean, that's what impeachment is, but then you just go down the list rather than having another vote or something. Anyways, it's kind of it's not beside the point, because today's quote, we have a sponsor today. Let's see here. Who do we got today, Greg? Mr. Fox AAA TNT. Call 1-800-TNT-NOV5 if you want some AAA grade TNT for whatever your blowing up needs are. That is Mr. Fox, FAWKES TNT, 1-800-TNT-NOV5. They are our sponsor today, and the quote brought to you by them is a quote by comedian Russell Brand. Total revolution of consciousness and our entire social, political, and economic system is what interests me, but that's not on the ballot. That's again Russell Brand, again comedian and author. It's a quote that really hits me, 'cause it's kind of my personal feelings on a lot of this stuff too. Every kind of election goes by, and all these sort of little sort of things happen along the way, and And all the while I'm kind of thinking like, well, why can't we just have like immediate major change in some areas, you know? Like I don't see why that can't happen uh without really upsetting, much, even if you're talking like insane wealth distribution from like the top to everybody else. um like the people, like, let's be honest, the people that the wealth would be coming from would still be left with unspendable wealth, and like they have unspendable wealth multiplied and compounded upon itself millions of times. Like it can be spread, and they can still live their lavish lives, and that's kind of what bothers me about that whole scenario. uh and yeah, I don't know, like people might I don't know, tune out as soon as you hear that quote is from Russell Brand. To me, that's a mistake. I mean, humorists and comedians have always provided some of our most insightful thought on our social commentary, and so, but they always seem to not be listened to in their time. Except for now, I think that there's kind of a rise in comedy of consciousness, comedy of perception, and I'm not saying that there wasn't before, but comedy is especially like something like stand up, it's kind of a new thing. I mean, there was always like bards and jesters and whatnot, but as far as being able to really speak out against political establishment, it's new. Like, it's, as far as like our whole global social structures is concerned, like, it's relatively new to be free to do that. People have always done it, but it's always had to be like underhanded, like, mixed in with humor and Shakespeare plays and stuff like that. But it can be overt now. Like, you can tell the president of the United States to go fuck himself right to a TV camera and like not have to worry about getting taken down. And so it's an interesting time for comedy and humor that way. And by recent, I mean like 100 years or so. Like, when I'm talking recent, I mean like sociologically recent, which is a pretty long time scale. So I kind of want to break down the quote here, because he mentions a few different key words, things that he would like total revolution of. First is consciousness. So a revolution in consciousness would be like a revolution in our state of mind, from like a personal survival mentality to species survival and harmony, because we can make personal survival obsolete, like the feeling for it. There are obviously places, a lot of places in the world that's still where this instinct is required. But that's because we haven't been sharing our wealth and knowledge. And by wealth, I don't just mean money. I just mean like we haven't been sharing what we have been, accumulating as far as a society that has grown, faster than other pockets of the world. We've just been keeping all of that for ourselves and wanting to profit off of the other parts of the world while trying to give them, in order to give ourselves more and more and more, and it's just becoming a bigger and bigger problem. When like I said before, like, we can provide everybody, like, I firmly believe that we can provide everybody with basic comforts, like pretty like great comforts, like homes and food and internet and things that can revolutionize humanity. Like, those things are not unattainable, and they're not providing them for places that don't currently have them is not a prohibitive cost. Like, totally, it's not a prohibitive cost from an absolute scale. It's a prohibitive cost from a profit scale for the people that build those things. I'm not saying that people that build those things should just be giving them away for free. I'm saying that we socially should be getting some back from the people that have taken a lot from this society. They've given a lot to us, but they've taken a lot, and then it's time for them to give it back to us. in the form of helping people that actually need it. I'm not talking about like give me, can't even think of anything. I'm not talking about give me anything. I'm talking about give everybody that needs a basic baseline. Give them a basic baseline. A proper education, regardless of where their parents come from. Everybody can start at the same starting point, and we can give them that. Electricity, food, not having to live in meal insecurity. We have that in our own country, and like that's in our own country, in our own Western society, and it's shameful because there are people that walk around with enough in their pockets to change like hundreds of people's lives at a time, and they just and we just don't. And it's probably pretty easy for me to talk about as somebody who doesn't have just the money in my pocket to change people's lives, but maybe one day, maybe the more people listening will be able to get there. So yeah, but I do think that there is a change happening with our collective consciousness in the way of how we treat each other, our views on energy and using collective knowledge and equality, and like basic decency, stuff like the quote unquote like Weinstein scandals or however you want to title the Hollywood and the not even Hollywood, just like this kind of revolution in exposure of terrible things that women have had to be enduring for many, many decades. And so we are changing those types of things, I think. And it's getting better, and hopefully I think that as people from this generation, as people that are coming in on their mid 30s, late 40s, as we start to move into politics and things like that, I think these types of shifts will happen really, really fast, like within a decade or so. So he mentions politics. We need a revolution in our political system, which I agree. It needs a revolution, like I said, of I think people moving into those positions of power that have differing opinions and no allegiances to old buddies that run energy companies and gun lobbies and bullshit like that. So as those people start to leave, hopefully sooner rather than later, their places will hopefully be taken up by people who are at least somewhat more progressive towards peaceful and inclusive and collective ideas. But also taking the money out of it, I think, is number one. Like, I don't see how you can run a political system where people are able to kind of like just throw money at a candidate because there's obvious bribery connotations involved in that. People don't call it bribery, they call it contributions. But when you're donating like hundreds of millions of dollars to somebody, like, what do you expect something back? Of course you do. Of course these people do. Like, I'd rather they just set like a pretty modest limit on what these candidates can actually use to run on. I don't know how something like that would end up being enforced, but I think here in Canada we have political campaign limits. But I also think, in the U.S. they have an issue. The biggest issue, in my opinion, is the two-party system. Like, there's no room for dissenting ideas, both bad and good, to have their own voice in the actual end game. Like they do rise. You see the rise of people like Bernie Sanders on like a more left-wing side. And you see the rise, obviously, of somebody like Donald Trump on the more right-wing side. If the U.S. had the ability to have those people run their own separate campaigns from the Democratic and Republican parties and have like a socialist party and a Tea Party or whatever you want to call it, Nazi party, then they would have that. And Donald Trump might get like 25% of the vote or something, which is still despicable, but like he would get maybe 25% of the vote while everything else is kind of split, and you'd have a parliament like we do of people that their voices are still heard. That's the point, right? They're in the parliament and their voices are still heard and they're still part of the conversation. The way the two-party system works, I mean, everybody just tries to navigate their way to the middle, which is not really a good way to get decision making done, because when you're trying to please everybody, you can't. It's just impossible. So you end up, inevitable conclusions like somebody like Donald Trump popping up and everybody getting rallied behind him just because he's something different, which I don't necessarily disagree with. I think that I think that somebody from the outside to shake things up in the political spectrum was potentially a good thing. Obviously, it was the very, very worst possible person that it could have been. If it was like Bill Gates or like an Elon Musk or something like that, then yeah, it probably would have helped. Although Musk is like Canadian and South African, I think, so I don't think he can run for president. Sorry. And his third point was the economic system. Economics is where my education is, and it, I don't know, maybe it countered it a little bit as I learned more about it, but it made me realize that it's like money is not a thing. Like, it's just not there, especially since we've gone off, or at least the U.S. gone off the gold standard. Like, there's nothing backing it anymore, and like things like Bitcoin start to pop up and that type of thing, which kind of make me nervous because there's nothing backing that either. What is the real economy behind Bitcoin? Like, where is its value coming from? Because we judge value of countries' currencies based on their economic strength, their exports and their imports, their actual production. What is Bitcoin's production? And so stuff like that makes me nervous. I mean, not nervous in a way that Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un make me nervous, but just nervous from like an investment standpoint anyways. So I mean, money is increasingly becoming this just like scorecard that we have. It's not even really a thing. Everybody owes everybody everything. Debt is just like an ever-growing bubble where everybody owes everybody and nobody's ever paying each other back. And so it's either going to come to a head where all of these debts get called and nobody can pay them, a la the 2008 financial crisis, or all of that debt gets forgiven somehow. And that, I mean, I don't even know how that would work. That would probably, cause some sort of violence in some sort of areas, and or maybe not. I don't know. That would be an interesting experiment, I think, to just forgive all global debt. But it would never happen. So, and it's kind of like it used to provide a medium exchange so that people could easily exchange things, but now it's just kind of making it more it's making it harder and harder, because we, instead of seeking something that we want, we just seek money and more money and money and money and money, and not really sure what we're gonna do if we have more of it, but we're just gonna get more of it. I mean, obviously a lot of us have goals in mind for money and stuff like that, but here's the thing, like, if you achieve those goals, do you keep going for money or do you stop? And then if you achieve those next goals, do you keep going for money or do you stop? And like, blah, 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 and that's how these people that end up at the very, very top, end up just collecting more and more and more and more, because they want to see their scorecard go up, because somebody else's scorecard is closer or higher. It's a very, I don't know, it's a weird mindset. Something that strikes me about this quote is that it doesn't really mention any sort of violence. Like, it's just talking about, it actually says that's not on the ballot. Like, it's saying like, hey, like, we want this option, like, but it's not there. Like, who's going to give us this option? Maybe Russell Brand should be giving us this option. But I heard a TED talk with an economist. The name escapes me. But he was speaking about revolutions, and they were talking about violent revolutions and stuff like that. And I used to think until pretty recently, because this was not that long ago, it was only like less than a year ago that I heard this, that like a violent revolution, especially in a place like the U.S., is almost inevitable, one way or the other. Like there is violence there, severe violence. It's already happening. I don't know, maybe we're in it. But yeah, so but some sort of you'd think that there would be some sort of trigger after one of these shootings or something. But anyways, I used to think that there's kind of an inevitability of violence in any revolution in any society where equality is getting out of hand, inequality is getting out of hand. And this guy, well, he made an interesting point, and sorry his name escapes me, but he made an interesting point of, it's like, think about the U.S. You have these little congressional elections, municipal elections, where they vote for these people that vote in this electoral college that ultimately decides who is president of the United States. Normally the electoral college votes along with the populace, but not always. And these are little tiny elections that I'm sure we have them in Canada too. In mayor elections or little like chancellor and like stuff like that. And so the people that show up for these elections are in like the 30%, much less the only like 60% or whatever end up actually showing up to the general election. And then so what about these small elections? 30% of people show up to them, and then the people that those 30% pick are the ones that end up choosing the president of the United States. So you don't need a violent revolution. You need 100% voter turnout, because then that's a revolution right there. You have 70% of people that aren't politically engaged now their voices are counting. So I mean, I don't know what is with people that don't vote, but like I know people find it boring sometimes, but you have to it's an important part of what we're all dealing with, right? Politics and economics, like it does affect all of us, and like the decisions that get made at this high level, things on net neutrality, things on civil rights, things on judges appointed and stuff like that, Supreme Court judges appointed, like those have repercussions that last for decades in the long run. And so we have to be mindful of those things. Like, it's not just one-offs. Like, this isn't just like hey, let's flip of the bird to the liberals or flip of the bird to the conservatives or whatever. Like, these things create waves that last for decades and sometimes centuries. So I guess that could be it for today. A little thought on like revolution and violent revolution, and what types of revolutions we should be looking for and seeing and pushing for. That quote again, total revolution of consciousness and our entire social, political, and economic system is what interests me, but that's not on the ballot. That is Russell Brand, and that quote again is brought to you by Mr. Fox, AAA TNT, 1-800-TNT-NOV5. That is AAA grade TNT. It will blow up anything you need it to blow up. Thank you, Greg, for finding that sponsor for us today. Mr. Fox, FAWKES, AAA TNT, 1-800-TNT-NOV5. You call them for all your explosion needs. Thanks again to Crooked Spies for giving us some tunes today. And thanks, as always, to anybody that's tuning in and paying attention. We will see you guys again tomorrow. This is Throwback Thursday. Tomorrow is Friday, and it will be the completion of our first week of the quote of the day. Maybe we'll do a little something special tomorrow. So yeah, everybody, thanks again for listening, and have a good day.
This is how it goes when you're on